Thank you for joining us for CNTV. I'm Brad Clonch along with Quin Tran. A Chickasaw doctor on the front lines shares with us his battle with COVID-19.
It's a battle that became a fight for his own life. Dr. Grant Lashley, an emergency room physician, treated COVID-19 patients in Louisiana. Within a few weeks of the pandemic, he became sick and spent more than 3 months in the hospital. He shares with us his journey through the illness and the long recovery ahead. Dr. Lashley, let's have you take us back to around mid-April when you first became sick.
April 18th, and actually about 3 or 4 days before that, I was working in the ER in Abbeville, Louisiana, just outside of Lafayette, and I would tell my wife about 7 o'clock at night, I'm not feeling well. And so we checked my temperature. I didn't have a fever. I wasn't short of breath. I really had no symptoms. And by the next morning, I'd feel fine. And that happened for about 3 or 4 days. About 7 o'clock at night, I'd get those same symptoms. I'd feel bad. Nothing would show up. So then on April 18th, that's when I said, with all this ER exposure, the head of my wife's department, she teaches at a teaching university hospital, and head of her department's infectious disease, and said, listen, with his exposures in the ER, we should at least have a COVID test to see if there's anything going on. So we went and we had an outpatient test for COVID, influenza, and strep. The strep was positive, but so was the COVID. At that point in time, I'm a provider, I'm frontline, I'm not used to being sick. And so I said, well, my saturation, my oxygen saturation when I breathe is still about 94, 95. Not bad, not the best though, but I'll just ride this out at home. So I was going to self-quarantine, go through the things, won't be that bad. My labs were interesting. In COVID, a lot of times the white blood cell count, which is one of our fighting cells that fight off illness and such, in COVID is usually very low. That's not like an infection like pneumonia or other things where the white blood cell count would be very high. But in COVID, it's low. So that lets you know that my test was accurate, that goes along with it. So the chest x-ray, it had bilateral changes that looked pretty bad. It's called ground glass appearance. It's how it looks when you look on a chest x-ray. And so the head of the radiologist there said, let's get a CT scan of the chest and see what's going on with this. So they did the CT, and she said, we know he has COVID. Everything in his studies support it. And at that time, I still was thinking, I'll just ride this out. My wife said, no, you need to be in the hospital. So they found a COVID unit in Lafayette at Lafayette General Medical Center. And that's when they said they're going to put me over there and watch me for a day or two. So at that point in time, that's when they said, about a day later, your saturation's dropped. Your fever's gone up to 104, and we need to put you on the ventilator. We need to intubate you. Is a shocking statement because I know what goes along with that. And so, moving me to where I need to be intubated, and I was intubated for 39 days, which is a very long time. At that point in time, they had to put a tube in my neck to breathe. On Mother's Day, my wife had been asked because things weren't looking very good, to remove me from life support. And, she said, I wasn't prepared for that. She says, even though I'm a provider, even though I've come in contact with this a lot, my husband came to the hospital sick, but he hadn't had anything before this. So she said, I couldn't agree to that. But it was up for discussion because things were looking pretty scary for a while.
Dr. Lashley, so the healthcare workers had to do everything available and possible to keep you alive.
Yes. I did get IV plasma. I was the second person in our region to get plasma, and that's to take the plasma from a patient that's had COVID and give us some of their cells to give us, hopefully, some immunity or some antibodies to fight off the COVID. It's still experimental. We think it helps, but we're not certain. There's the medication Plaquenil. At the time, they thought it was a good thing. Now it's controversial. They tried different antibiotics. Once again, at that time, it was not recommended to get steroids. But I was getting so severe, the critical care doctor said, listen, even though it's not recommended, because at the time they thought steroids would increase your viral production of the coronavirus. And so he said, we don't have a choice. He's looking severe enough. And so the name of it's dexamethasone. And he said, we need to give it. It's really not recommended. But interesting enough, 3 to 4 weeks later, it became standard of care as frontline treatment for COVID patients. So it was the smart thing to do from my doctor. I really thanked him for this, but at the time it was not recommended. And I really believe that turned me around.
So after 39 days, was that in the ICU?
Yes, that was in the ICU, and I couldn't see my family during that time period. I couldn't see my wife or my 3 children. It's hard for people to be that separated from their loved ones. And I mean, luckily for me, my wife said I was vigilant. I knew who was all taking care of you. I talked to them all the time. I worked at some of the hospitals you go to, so I was able to see what was going on. And she's my rock, and she really went to bat for me. She said, I'm not going to let him die. And so every night, she said, for 39 days, I didn't sleep. I was trying to stay after this thing to make sure we didn't lose you. This was a hard thing for her to be both a provider and a spouse. She says, I became a single mother overnight. And for the next 90 some days, I was it. I had to keep my job. I had to keep you alive and keep the 3 kids. She said that was very hard. When I came out of the ICU, my first questions from my wife was, did I hurt anybody? Did any of my staff, did any of my other doctors I work with, did anybody come down with what I got from me? Because I don't want to hurt somebody. And that's what a provider thinks of, not how am I doing. I want to make sure I didn't hurt somebody because I was exposed to several of them. And luckily, nobody close to me got it, but it's still a concern of mine.
So you came out of ICU in 39 days. There were still lingering effects.
I didn't know really how long I'd been out. I didn't have a grasp on that. That's a long time to be out. And I woke up. So in my mind, I'm awake now. Let's get back to life. So at that time, I couldn't sit up. I couldn't walk. I couldn't roll over. I couldn't move any extremities at the time. I had a right wrist drop, left foot drop, and I had a lot of what's called paresthesias, or pins and needles in my hands and my feet. I'm not diabetic, but that a lot of times is what they describe like that. And it's not just pain, but it's like pins and needles. And once again, initially, I didn't have a grasp on any of that. I just knew I was awake. My friends walked in, the critical care doctor I've known for most of my life. And, he said, Grant, we got to get you up. We got to get you out of here. I said, that's what I'm talking about. And so they moved me from the ICU to an LTAC facility, long-term assisted care type of facility. And at that time, they realized, I have a wrist drop, a foot drop. Let's go ahead and make sure there's nothing else going on. And they did an MRI of my head. And that's when they realized during that long period, I had a stroke. Yes. And then stroke is related with the COVID. So once again, that was something that people don't hear about a lot, but it can happen. I'm used to everything in the ER going fast. Everything should be fast. And I realized my situation was not going to be fast. It's going to take some time. So at that point in time, they started me with some physical therapy, about 30 minutes a day, and they watched me over the next 2 weeks. Well, at that point in time, we had some decisions to make. What do we do next? How do we get better? Because you can't sit up, you can't roll over, you can't walk, can't feed yourself, can't go to the restroom yourself. And I'm thinking, what kind of life is this? So at that point in time, my attending doctor and my wife discussed it. My wife started doing some research, and that's when she found a rehab facility that does COVID and stroke. It's called TIRR, TIRR, stands for the Institute of Rehabilitation and Research at Memorial Hermann in Houston. And it's one of the, it's regionally, it's one of the top facilities in our country. There's others too, but that's one close enough to us that I could get to it. And so once again, because I had the stroke, the neuro component, they were able to accept me. So that's about a 4-hour drive on an ambulance, which wasn't comfortable. And to take me over there to start my rehabilitation. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm smart enough now to understand that I'm in a bad situation. I can't walk. I can't sit up. I can't do anything for myself. I've got young children. My wife's pulling the cart, keeping everything going in our life. But I'm thinking, how can I participate in this? Because I can't do anything. So once I got over there, the very first, once again, they were on COVID lockdown. My wife was able to see what the facility was, but in the next time period, 6 weeks, they couldn't see me. But I had very motivated staff. There's a rehab doctor. He was a team captain, but he had a speech therapist, physical therapist, and occupational therapists all involved in my care. And they had a rigorous daily routine. I mean, it's not saying no. It's not saying I'm just going to rest. It's not feeling sorry for yourself. Every day you had to get up, get dressed. You had a schedule every morning, and they were going to get you moving. And I'm very thankful for that. To me, a lot of times they're the unsung heroes because you don't see them, you don't hear about them, but they're the ones that help us get back on our feet once we get like this.
You're in the 4th month of your recovery.
Yes.
Where does your health stand?
My labs are fantastic. My kidney function's perfect. Now, one thing I didn't know until last week was when I was in the ICU, I had to have dialysis twice. My wife said, some things I'm not telling you happened that were really bad. And luckily it was only 2 times and didn't require anything else. But, and that's pretty serious to get to that point. But once again, as far as now, we're doing good. I'm down to one, baby aspirin and 1 medication. Right now, I still have to wear a brace occasionally on the right hand. On the left foot, I have a small brace, but they don't believe this will be long-term. They think it will get better. So once again, since I've been home now, I've started outpatient physical therapy and occupational therapy at Lourdes Rehab Center. And, yesterday was another big milestone for me. We put electrical stimulation onto my wrist. And up till then, we'd never seen extension of my fingers at all. And yesterday it started. And it was, delightful to see that happening because I wasn't sure that would come back. But my staff in Texas said, listen, be patient, do your work, put your time in, and it's probably going to get better. And, once again, every day something new like that happens, although small, for me, it's real big. I try to walk as much as I can with a walker. Now, they said yesterday, once again, that we're coming close. I'm so excited that we'll be switching from a walker to a cane. They're not going to do it immediately, but they say they see enough improvement that is where we're heading. And once we switch to that, they said the goal from that would be to not have anything and get rid of the cane. I said, that's what I'm talking about. So my therapist in Texas, we all have a bet. When I can get so I can walk without anything, they're all going to meet me at the Grand Canyon, and we're going to hike the Grand Canyon together. That's one of my loves. I used to go a lot. And I thought it would never happen again, but I said, if I can get independent enough, you guys better meet me out there, and we're going to do that canyon together.
Well, I hope you make it there because that would be a wonderful, wonderful gift at the end of this journey.
Yes, and one thing I didn't say was interesting. So being in the hospital 90-some days, finally I asked the therapist what they said, is there anything you want to do today? Because they try to have you involved in your therapy. And I said, I want to go out and see the sky. She said, what? I said, I haven't seen it in months. I want to see some trees. And I want to see the sky. And she said, we don't think about that a lot because we're trying to provide y'all care, but let's go. And so they rolled me out the back, and it was amazing. I mean, everything smells different. Seeing some big live oak trees was wonderful. Seeing the sky, and I think a lot of times we forget that is such a thing we love. And so it was a she said, I'll remember this for other patients because this is important. She says, seeing just fluorescent lights for 90-some days must be rough. I said, yeah, I want to get outside. And one thing coming home that was wonderful was my kids. My wife is thrilled, but my dog had been so down. And she just went crazy when she realized I was home. So it's, once again, every part of the family participates in this.
Let's talk about the emotional component of this because you were in isolation. You didn't get to see your family. They didn't get to see you. And you have 3 children, elementary age children. And that time span is a very long time for 3 young children.
It is. And it's a big thing for a young child to grasp. Even now, my older son, who's 9, asked me, said, Dad, I don't want to make you cry, but because you had COVID, does that mean you won't live as long? And so, it's those type of things that you've got to, I said, in my mind, I've beaten this. Even though right now Dad's not 100%, I've beaten this, but still look at it from a child's eyes, let you know there's some concern there. My little girl and my younger two are twins, and they were very concerned during the whole time period. They knew when they had to go places, they'd wear masks. That's a new thing for our environment, but especially for us, we encourage that.
You have a different perspective now, being the patient and not the doctor caring for someone.
You're exactly right. And switching over to that role is somewhat difficult. Initially you want to keep being participating, but you're a patient now. There's some dynamics of this recovery process that it will change things. It will change how I interact with a patient. It will change how I teach another doctor what we're looking at, because you've got to realize we can talk theories and tests and diseases, but we also need to talk about people. People play a big role in families, and we've got to look at all that aspect of things when we're trying to improve somebody's quality of life.
You're going to go back and be this fantastic doctor who has such a wonderful perspective now of the patient and what they undergo.
Yes, and one thing we talk about, this is one of those life-changing events. And so my wife and I sit down regularly to talk about, what does the next phase of our life look like? I've always been a young provider, and I realize now I'm 50, so I'm not quite the youngest anymore, which I still see myself that way, but I'm planning for what's the next phase of my life look like. There's certain parts of my career that I've thoroughly loved. I love all of it, but I thoroughly loved the time that I spent with the Indian Health Service. I worked with the Navajos in Chinle and then Phoenix Indian Medical Center. I also worked with the Cherokee and the Cherokee Nation, the Eastern Band up in Cherokee, North Carolina. And my wife and I discussed it, and that was a very happy time for me. And when I get back to the point that I'm functional, that's something that's on our list to do as a family and professionally. When you get to this point in time, you start realizing it's not just about goals. It's not just about your daily life that you're going through every day. There's some emotional and some spiritual components that you may not get to face on a regular basis, and maybe you should. It's when it comes to this point in time, you've got to take another assessment of life and what's important. Until you've experienced something like this, it's really hard to describe. There are little things that everybody takes for granted. I don't anymore. The little things in life you've got to look at and enjoy. Take the times with your family. It's that important.
I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad. I'm happy to see you, Dad. You're the best dad. You're the best dad in the world.
The good news, his family is healthy. His wife and children tested negative for COVID-19. They're all now helping him at home with his recovery, a recovery that Dr. Lashley says will take another 6 months to a year.
We hope he fully recovers very soon. Dr. Lashley stressed the importance of mitigation efforts, hand washing, wearing masks in public, and responsible distancing to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The Chickasaw Nation COVID-19 Citizen Support Program has been established to provide aid to Chickasaw citizens. Chickasaw citizens negatively impacted by the COVID-19 public health emergency may receive assistance, including those who have experienced loss of income or financial hardship due to unemployment, furlough, reduction in work hours and compensation, or layoff. Several types of assistance packages are available. Citizens may apply at this web address on the screen for the Chickasaw Nation COVID-19 Relief Funds. Chickasaw-owned businesses may apply for economic support through the COVID-19 Emergency Community and Business Support Program. In other news, distance and virtual instruction begins August 17th for all Chickasaw Nation Head Start centers and preschool. This is for the first 9 weeks of the term. In-person instruction will begin when the community spread of COVID-19 is low enough to ensure the safety of students and staff. The Chickasaw Nation has Head Start centers in Ardmore, Sulphur, and Tishomingo, and an accredited preschool in Ada. The coronavirus forced summer youth camps and programs to cancel this year.
A Chickasaw teenager is grateful she was able to pursue her individual sport. What is it about golf that makes it so appealing to you?
It's just the challenges that you come across and how much you get to experience and how much it helps you in life. And it's a game that you can always play. You can play whenever or however old you are, and you can always play golf. I think I was actually 5 whenever I started playing, and then I started getting into tournaments whenever I was 6. I'm pretty sure 6, almost 7. So yes, OJGT is Oklahoma Junior Golf Tour, and it is a tour that is for 12 to 18-year-old girls, and then 14. I think they're actually letting 12 to 18 boys, and it is just so much fun. I usually go practice like every day, and then I go to my golf coach, which I love my golf coach, and he tells me some stuff to work on, and then I'll go work on that stuff before the tournament. Then I'll go to the tournament, and it's very fun.
We met you a couple of years ago. You had to be about 8 or 9 years old, probably 9 years old. And you had a really good drive, and you weren't a bad putter either. Has your game changed? Are you still a great putter? And
in Mississippi, every year there's a putting contest that every age group has. And since I moved up on the age groups, I putted with the older age group, which was 13 and 18, and I won that contest, so it was very fun. It's really cool because I've never won the putting contest, but once I got in an older age division, I actually won it, so it was pretty cool. I am really, really good off at the tee, and sometimes my driver isn't as good, but that's just how golf is. If one thing's really good, then one thing it's going to be kind of offish. So usually whenever I start driving with in tournaments off of the team, the girls will be impressed because I'm much younger than they are, and I'll still drive with them, and so they always comment on that.
Bean celebrated her 13th birthday this summer. Her wish is to play college golf. She's hoping that summer youth programs, camps, and activities will be back in full swing next year.
In the meantime, many events and celebrations have had to go to a virtual platform, including the Chickasaw Cultural Center's 10th anniversary. In this virtual celebration, Chickasaw is reflected on the Cultural Center's story and impact. The Chickasaw Cultural Center not only tells the history of the Chickasaw people, it also showcases the talents of citizens. Dustin Mader designed the logo to commemorate the Cultural Center's 10th anniversary. It's a design with cultural significance.
In the 10 years, number on the 0 part is a representation of a shell gorget pattern representing like the rattlesnake and the serpent. And this particular gorget that I based it on was found near the homelands. And it kind of symbolizes this tenacity and growth and a sense of renewal. Well, the red and the black and a little bit of the white are kind of calling upon the woodpecker color scheme in there. And that was also a symbol of the warriors, the color scheme. And it was just kind of showing that tenacity and, that boldness. It was just land. It was just, part of the park or adjacent to the park. And from what it was to what it is today, it's a place to go to gain knowledge and to share knowledge.
This was another virtual event this summer, the announcement of the 5 inductees into the Chickasaw Hall of Fame. In this episode, we feature John Hilton. His colleagues tell us about his dedication to serving the Chickasaw people.
I believe John Hilton belongs in the Chickasaw Nation Hall of Fame. I am proud that the Chickasaw Nation is honoring him. John loved the Chickasaw people, not just one. He loved all Chickasaw people. He showed it in his actions each and every day.
Born in 1952 in Ada to John Mitchell Hilton and Ruby Lee Miller Hilton, John Hilton attended Bing High School, graduating in 1970, and continued his education, earning a bachelor's degree in psychology from East Central University. His career with the Chickasaw Nation began in 1979 as a grant writer, then as a planner for grants and contracts, section head, and finally, director of planning. John's resourcefulness and compassion were hallmarks of his career as he assisted Chickasaws with direct services, including disaster relief, home repairs, and emergency aid, always working to ensure proper funding was available to meet the needs of the people. In 1987, Mr. Hilton was appointed as a special assistant to Governor Bill Anatubby, a position Mr. Hilton maintained until he passed away.
John was one of those people that he definitely cared about people. I used to work with John because we would sometimes have problems that he would help us with because he worked directly for Governor Anatubby. John was a sweet person. I liked him and admired him because he was such a kind and giving person. He had a good sense of humor. He could make you laugh when you thought it was raining and you didn't have a happy thought. He could make you laugh and feel good, and so to me, he was very special.
Mr. Hilton passed away in 2008. The programs he worked on still benefit Chickasaws today.
Look for more profiles of this year's Hall of Fame inductees in the next episode of CNTV. We'll see you next time.